Hi, I'm on Grand Turk, and I'm going to talk to you today about the federal civil case that is now part of Karen Reed's case against all of the Massachusetts defendants.
Here's what we're talking about today.
Well, I promised I would do a video from the road if I needed to on things, and it looks like I need to do one for the Karen Reed civil case. I saw where they had removed it to federal court. Now, if you've seen my video on the removal process and the removal statute, I won't go into the mechanics of that at this point unless somebody feels like I didn't explain it well enough in that video. And I'll try to link that video somewhere in here during the course of my editing today. But the long and short of it is that when someone files a proper notice of removal in a civil case, the trial court has absolutely no discretion. It has to send the case up to the federal court. Now, it doesn't mean it has to stay there, because I've had cases remanded back to state court in numerous times, but it certainly means that at the very beginning it goes up to the federal court, and everything that happens to the case from that point on goes through that federal court. It has to happen there first. If it gets remanded, then it goes back to state court. But if it doesn't, then everything happens there. And of course, in federal court, you don't have live streamed trials, and you'll have to send somebody into the actual courtroom to figure out what's going on. So that's kind of a bad thing for all of us here in YouTube, but it may be good for the litigants here, because I think a lot of times publicity can sometimes make it much more difficult to pick a jury, among other things. The other thing is that previously, the jury would have come from the county, Bristol County, where the case was set, and now it will come from all over the state of Massachusetts, which also may be good for Karen, it may be good for the defendants. Nobody really knows. And in fact, picking the jury is much more difficult in federal court than it is in state court. In state court, you tend to have a lot more discretion. In federal court, usually the voir dire starts with the federal judge, and then he'll give each side a much more limited amount of time to do the jury than will a state court judge most of the time. At least that's been my experience in federal court. So it's not a plaintiff-friendly venue, as I've said before. Now, it looks like the McCabe's and the Alberts and those folks removed it to federal court. If for any reason the MSP people did not support that, then it could be remanded if they did not want a federal venue or a federal jurisdiction. But I imagine everybody, all of the defendants, agreed that it should go to federal court, because there are certain procedural advantages that you get there, primarily the federal rules of evidence as well as the federal rules of civil procedure. So that, again, creates some efficiencies in getting the case tried. But it also creates a mechanism through which evasion and delay seems to pay a lot more dividends than it would in any other way or in any other jurisdiction. So in this case, they have filed the notice of removal. It's in federal court. There are ways to get out. One way to get out would be to dismiss the non-federal claims. So, for example, the Massachusetts Civil Rights Act claim, which is a state law claim, they could dismiss that. They could dismiss the claims against for malicious prosecution under common law, and those would go out of that court. They could then be refiled solely against the other defendants. But the problem with doing that is, in essence, you are splitting your cause of action. And there are certain rules that go into that and could make that an episode of pure futility. If the court decides that you were playing games with, trying to secure a certain jurisdiction, what they call judge shopping or venue shopping, then again, you could run into some real trouble with the federal judge or the state court judge, either one. It's a real problem, and I don't know whether they anticipated this. I'm sure they did. They're smart lawyers. They had to know this was in the offing. And so now it goes into federal court, and we'll see where it goes from there. If I had been bringing this case, given my very clear aversion to federal court, what I would have done is I would have sued the Alberts and the McCabe's separately from the people who are MSP people. Now, I realize there is some concern that there is a conspiracy going on there. That doesn't mean that you can't name the MSP people as conspirators. It doesn't mean that you can't say that, for example, Jennifer McCabe was in a conspiracy with Michael Proctor and Yuri Buchanan and all of that, if indeed that's the allegation that you want to make. I'm certainly not suggesting that's true. It's simply an allegation at this point. However, what you have to do is you have to make sure you don't include them as a defendant, because then if they're in the federal case and you've filed a federal case with just the federal claims, the 42 USC section 1983 claims, then you could have both of them going on at the same time. You sue the MSP people in federal court, and you sue the state court defendants in state court. And that could certainly work, because in this situation, the elements are different. There's a different element for malicious prosecution under 42 USC than there is under state law malicious prosecution, and specifically the invocation of under color of law. And as I mentioned in a different video, you really don't have under color of law against the civil plaintiffs who are not agents of the state. And yeah, you could make the allegation that Brian Higgins and Mr. Albert are indeed agents of the state. Well, Brian Albert is the state agent of the state. You could say that Higgins is an agent of the federal government. But again, they weren't really acting under that color of authority at the time, or if they were, they're certainly more proper in federal court than they are in state court. So you have to untangle this mess and then file a motion to remand, and it would be anybody's guess as to whether you would get anywhere with that kind of what I would call strategic approach to eliminating the federal case, or eliminating the advantages in the federal case. Either way, whether you keep them together in federal court or whether you split it and remand part of it, it's still going to require a lot of legal time, a lot of legal effort. And here's the interesting thing about that. One of the first things they're going to do in federal court is file a motion to dismiss the Alberts and McCabe's out of that federal case. And they can be dismissed out of the federal claims, I think, because they weren't acting under color of state law. But the supplemental jurisdiction that attaches to the state law claims, they can't be dismissed from those without some rationale associated with either failure to state a claim or lack of jurisdiction. And I don't think either of those is going to fly, because the complaint was well drafted and well pleaded, and I think it would stand up. But again, you never know what allegations the defense counsel is going to make when they file those motions, and we'll just have to wait for that. But I thought I would do this and get this out. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. I apologize for the backdrop. I'm in a little cabin on the Virgin Brilliant Lady cruise ship. And for those of you who have asked, I will put a few photographs here at the end and a little bit of video here at the end that you may find interesting, perhaps even humorous. I have to mute some of it because it has copyrighted music on it, but you can still watch the actual video part of it, and I think it's fun. We are in Grand Turk today, and I'm on the cruise ship. We're using the cruise ship Wi-Fi. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here today. If you have the opportunity today, try to do one kind thing to help somebody else. Any kind thing will do. Buy somebody a Coke, get them a cup of coffee, anything that makes their day better. That would be a way to help make the world a better place. Because after all, isn't that what we're all after? Now, YouTube has a few things that they think you might be interested in, and they're going to be showing you that right up there.